She didn't even flinch when I dropped the plate. It hit the kitchen tile, cracked clean down the middle, and clattered into two perfect halves at her feet. She just stepped over it. Like it wasn't there. Like I wasn't there. That's when I realized she hadn't looked me in the eye in 11 days. I counted. Not once. Not when I offered her the last scoop of mashed potatoes. Not when I handed her the keys after she forgot them on the counter. Not even when I accidentally walked in on her folding laundry in just a robe. She looked past me. Through me. As if I were part of the furniture. Less than the dog. Less than the coffee table she shined with lemon oil every Saturday. And the worst part? I still made her coffee every morning. 2 sugars, oat milk, cinnamon on top, just the way she likes it. She never drank it. Just left it on the counter to go cold. I started pouring it down the sink before she could see it. I didn't want her to know I noticed. It was like living with a radio that only played static. No words. No music. Just that unbearable humming silence that settles behind your ribs and makes you want to scream just to hear something real. One night, I sat on the edge of our bed and whispered, "Are you okay?" She shifted under the covers, pulled them tighter, said nothing. I stared at her back for a full hour. Every time she twitched, I thought maybe she was about to turn around and say, "Sorry, I've just been in a weird place." Or even, "I'm mad at you." Anything. I would have taken anything. But nothing came. Not even breathing loud enough to feel human. 3 nights later, she got a text while we were watching a rerun of a show she used to love. She smiled. She smiled. Not at me. At the phone. I asked, "Who's that?" casually. She replied without looking up, "You wouldn't know him." Him. I told myself I misheard. She said it too fast. Maybe she said them. But deep down, I knew. And I hated myself for how fast I backed off. How fast I let her sit there, smiling at her secret, while I sat there pretending my hands weren't shaking. And then came this morning. She left before sunrise. Again. I didn't ask where. I already knew I wouldn't get an answer. But this time, I didn't sit and wait. I didn't check my phone. I didn't pace around the kitchen reheating the same cup of coffee 3 times. This time, I walked to the closet, pulled the same old duffel bag I used in college, tossed in some clothes, none of the good ones, just the ones she never complimented anyway, grabbed my wallet, and walked outside. The air hit different. Lighter. Like I'd stepped out of an aquarium I didn't realize I was drowning in. I didn't leave a note. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't think she'd notice. But oh, she did. And what she did after. It still makes my stomach twist when I think about it. Because when I came back just once, just to pick up something I forgot, I found the back door wide open, the bedroom light on, and something waiting for me on the kitchen table that changed everything. And no, it wasn't her. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon. That was the first thing I noticed. A strange, heavy warmth in the air, like someone had just baked a pie, but there was no pie. Just a candle burning quietly in the center of the table. A candle I didn't buy. In a jar I'd never seen. The flame flickered like it knew something I didn't. Right next to it was a picture frame. Our picture. Our wedding photo, to be exact. But the glass was cracked down the middle. Not shattered, not broken on the floor, just cracked. Intentionally. Like someone pressed into it hard with their thumb, then stopped. I stood there, staring at it, wondering if this was some kind of message. Was it meant to be symbolic? Or was it just clumsiness she couldn't be bothered to care about? Then I saw the envelope. My name on it. Just Edgar, no heart, no love, no little smiley face like she used to add when we left notes for each other on the fridge. I stared at it for too long before picking it up. My fingers were sweating, smudging the edge. Inside was a list. Not a letter, not an apology. A list. 2 towels in the bathroom, please take yours. Spare key removed from planner. Garage opener deactivated. I'm not ready to talk. That was it. For lines. For flat, cold facts, written in her handwriting that I used to think was elegant. I sank into the chair like someone had knocked the wind out of me. The candle flickered, and the silence was somehow louder than it had ever been when we were together. She had expected me to come back. That much was clear. She'd set this up like some sort of emotional tripwire. But for what? To push me further? To make sure I knew the door wasn't just closed, it was bolted from her side? I sat there for a long time. My coffee cup from the morning before still sat by the sink. My coat still hung on the hook. My shoes, the pair she hated, were exactly where I'd left them by the back door. Nothing had been moved. Nothing had been cleaned. It was like the house itself had been holding its breath since I left. Then I heard it, a sound from upstairs. I froze. My heart started pounding, stupidly hoping it was her, hoping she'd changed her mind, that she'd come running down the stairs saying, "I didn't mean it. I don't know what I'm doing." But it wasn't her voice. It was music. Soft, low, and coming from the Bluetooth speaker in our bedroom. She never used it. That was always my thing. I'd play piano instrumentals or jazz at night when I couldn't sleep. She used to tease me for being a middle-aged man in his 20s back when we met. But now it was playing something I didn't recognize. Not jazz. Not anything comforting. Something electronic and slow, almost sterile. And then I realized she hadn't just disconnected from me emotionally. She'd replaced the entire rhythm of the house. I crept up the stairs like a stranger in my own home. The door to the bedroom was cracked open. Light spilled out in a way that felt unfamiliar. I pushed it open slowly, expecting to see nothing. But the bed was made. The blinds were drawn. And on the nightstand, where I used to keep my books and her lavender lotion, was a men's leather wallet. Not mine. I didn't touch it. I didn't even move closer. I just stood there, staring at it like it might move. Like maybe I could blink and it would vanish. But it didn't. That was the moment I realized the truth I had been too cowardly to say out loud. There wasn't a crack between us anymore. It was a canyon, and someone else had already crossed over to the other side. I walked out, again, but this time it didn't feel like I was leaving. It felt like I'd been evicted, like she had peeled me out of her life and patched the hole with someone newer, smoother, quieter. But here's where it takes a turn, because just 2 hours later, while I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot, staring at people going in and out like nothing was happening, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just one sentence. "You should probably come get your dog." My stomach dropped. Milo. Our dog. She wouldn't. No, she couldn't. Do something to him. Right? Right? But the address it came from? It wasn't our house. It wasn't even in the same town. And that's when I knew this wasn't just about us anymore. It was about control. And the game had only just started. I drove like a lunatic. I shouldn't have. I know that. But the second I read that text, all the logic I had left flew out the window. I didn't think about what I was walking into. I didn't even think about the fact that Milo, our dog, never left the house without one of us. And now suddenly he was at a location I didn't recognize, sent to me from a number I'd never seen, with no explanation. Yeah, I panicked. The address was on the edge of town, right where the city started to turn into woods. I don't even know how long I'd been driving before I realized my hands were clenched so tight around the steering wheel that my knuckles had gone numb. When I finally pulled into the gravel driveway, the sun had dipped behind the trees and the whole place looked like something out of a documentary where people go missing. It wasn't a house. It was a cabin. An actual wooden cabin, small and square, with peeling paint and a crooked front step. The windows were fogged over, and there was a faint smell of wood smoke in the air, even though no one was burning anything. No car in sight. No movement. Just dead quiet. And then, a bark. A sharp, familiar bark that made my chest seize up. I got out of the car so fast I almost slipped. "Milo," I called, my voice cracking like a teenager's. Another bark came, then a whine, and I followed the sound to the side of the cabin. There he was, tied up to a rusted post with a piece of green rope, his tail wagging hesitantly. I rushed over, dropping to my knees. "Hey, buddy, it's okay. I got you," I whispered, fumbling with the knot. And then the porch light flicked on. I turned around so fast my vision blurred. A figure stood in the doorway. Male. Tall. Lean. Wearing a hoodie with the sleeves pushed up and a pair of old, muddy boots. I couldn't make out his face, the light was behind him, but his voice was low and unsettlingly calm. "You shouldn't have left her alone this long." That sentence hit harder than a punch. I stood up slowly, still shielding Milo behind my legs. "Who are you?" He stepped forward, just a little. The porch creaked. "Does it matter? You gave her space." I filled it. I didn't move. My heart was pounding so loud I couldn't hear the birds anymore. "You've been in my house?" He shrugged. "She invited me. Every Wednesday. You ever wonder why she started working late once a week?" I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words were stuck somewhere between my throat and my stomach. He smiled, or maybe sneered, then dropped something onto the porch floor. A key. My key. The one I thought I lost months ago. He kicked it gently toward me with his boot. "You won't need that anymore." I scooped up Milo and backed away. I didn't run. Not yet. But every muscle in my body was vibrating with the kind of fear that comes from realizing you've been living in a story someone else has been writing. I got into the car, slammed the door, and locked it. Milo curled into my lap, trembling. As I reversed out of the driveway, I saw him in the rearview mirror, just standing there, watching, not following, just watching, like he knew exactly what would happen next and didn't need to be part of it. That night, I didn't go home. I drove to a hotel 3 towns over and paid in cash. I didn't call Marla. I didn't text. I didn't even open social media. I just sat on the edge of a cheap motel bed with the dog asleep at my feet and the curtains drawn shut like the outside world had been completely erased. But the next morning, I got another text. Same number. This time it read, "Check the attic, if you still think you knew her." I hadn't been in the attic in over a year. I hated small spaces, hated dust. But now, I couldn't think about anything else. There was something up there, something she never wanted me to find, and I was going back to get it, even if it broke me. The worst part about walking back into your own house like an intruder is the silence. Not just the absence of sound, the absence of belonging. You open your own front door and expect something familiar, something warm, but instead the walls look at you like you shouldn't be there anymore. That's what it felt like as I stepped into the hallway, the key still warm from my palm, wondering if she'd already changed the locks and just hadn't told me. Everything was exactly where I'd left it, and yet, nothing felt like it was mine. I didn't waste time. I didn't wander. I didn't sit in the kitchen like last time, hoping to be haunted by some fragment of what we used to be. I went straight for the hallway closet, the one with the pull string in the ceiling above. The attic door. I hadn't touched it in over a year. Honestly, I forgot we even had an attic until that text brought it back like a bruise under a sleeve. I pulled down the wooden ladder. It groaned the way old things do when they're surprised someone still remembers them. Dust rained down in a quiet sigh. Milo paced in the hallway below, whining once, then curling up by the stairs as if to say, "This one's yours, buddy." I climbed up slowly, each step creaking louder than the last. The attic was barely lit, just a single bulb on a string swaying slightly like it knew something was wrong. I didn't even have to look for long. I saw it the moment I stood upright. In the corner, propped against an old chest of holiday decorations we hadn't used in years, was a cardboard box sealed with red duct tape. Not brown, not blue, red, thick, aggressively bright tape like a warning label wrapped around something no one was meant to see. I didn't hesitate. I dragged the box toward the light, kicked off the lid, and peeled back the layers. At first, it just looked like junk. Old receipts, a cracked picture frame, a notebook with some torn-out pages. But then I saw the envelopes. Dozens of them, all with my name on them, all unopened, postmarked from the same address, all from the same man, Harvey Winslow. I froze. That name. I'd heard it before, somewhere deep in the dusty filing cabinet of my brain. Then I remembered, Marla's old therapist. The one she saw after her mother died. The one she said helped her sort out her anger. I never met him. I wasn't allowed to. She said therapy was personal. I opened one of the letters, my hands shaking so hard I ripped it down the side. The handwriting wasn't hers. It was his. But every sentence was about her. Marla has made significant emotional progress this month. Marla continues to discuss detachment from the marriage. Marla has voiced confusion over Edgar's emotional role in her life. Marla has shared certain physical boundaries she wishes to maintain with her husband. I sat down hard, right there on the attic floor. I read 5 more letters. Then 10. The timeline didn't make sense. The sessions started 4 months earlier than she told me, and they didn't end when she said they did. In fact, they didn't end at all. The last letter was dated just 2 weeks ago, and it wasn't a therapy note. It was a thank you card. Inside, in the same neat script. Marla, I know this wasn't easy for you, but I'm proud of your courage. You're finally stepping into the life you deserve. I'll be ready when you are. Always. H. I dropped the card like it burned. My whole chest was tight. It wasn't just cheating. It wasn't just emotional abandonment. It was premeditated, planned, designed. She hadn't just left me in silence. She had unbuilt me, piece by piece, with another man guiding her through it like some sick architect of separation. And suddenly it hit me. Those nights she told me she was journaling. Those random solo trips to bookstores. The way she changed her phone password without ever explaining why. The late-night whispering. The distant stares. All of it. All of it had been part of this long, patient erosion. I went to the window at the far side of the attic. It looked out over our backyard. I could see the spot where she once planted lilacs for our 10th anniversary. Dead now. Just gray sticks poking from the soil. How poetic. And then I saw movement. A car. Pulling into the driveway. Her car. She was home. I closed the box. I didn't take the letters. I didn't even take the card. I left it all there, wide open, under the swaying bulb, and climbed down the ladder like I was waking up from a bad dream with my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the rest of the world. She didn't see me right away. She was carrying groceries, talking on her phone, laughing, loudly, happily, like she hadn't erased a man from her life one silent step at a time. I stood in the hallway in the shadows, and I watched her for one full minute, before she even knew I was there. She dropped the grocery bag the moment she turned and saw me. A can of soup rolled across the tile, tapping softly against the leg of the kitchen island. Her smile didn't vanish. It collapsed, like a building crumbling in on itself in perfect silence. Her phone was still at her ear. She blinked at me like I was some hallucination she hadn't prepared to confront yet. "I'll call you back," she muttered into the phone. Her voice was too steady, too controlled, like it had been waiting for this. She slipped it into her coat pocket. Then silence. "No, hi. No, what are you doing here?" Just one long, calculated look. I didn't speak. I didn't move. For the first time since all this began, I wanted her to be the one to fill the silence. She didn't. Instead, she walked past me, bent down, picked up the soup can, placed it back in the bag, then pulled the other groceries out like this was any normal day. Like I hadn't just descended from an attic full of betrayal. Like she hadn't just returned from whatever little fantasy world she was building with Harvey Winslow. Finally, she broke the silence. "So, you came back." I felt like I was standing in a room filling with gas, just waiting for someone to light a match. "Why is there a box full of letters in the attic?" I asked. My voice didn't even sound like mine. It came out flat, hollow. She didn't flinch. She just finished putting a loaf of bread into the pantry and closed the door gently. "You weren't supposed to find that." "So it's true." I pressed. She finally turned toward me fully, arms crossed over her chest. "You mean the part where I started therapy because I was drowning in this marriage? Or the part where I found someone who actually made me feel like I existed?" It hit me like a slap, but not the kind that stings. The kind that numbs. I laughed. Quietly. Bitterly. That someone being the guy who wrote you love notes and therapy letters? The one who signed a card like you were his prom date? Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand it." "No," I cut her off, stepping forward now, the pressure inside finally bubbling. "You don't understand. You cut me off without a single word. You turned me into a roommate you didn't even like. I begged you to talk to me, Marla. Do you even remember that? Me, sitting on the edge of the bed like a lost child, asking you if you were okay? You stared at the wall like I was air." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just shook her head slowly like she was disappointed in me. "You're making this dramatic. You gave my dog to a stranger." I snapped, finally raising my voice. "A man who talked to me like I was a guest in my own life. You had him leave notes. Texts. Do you even realize how insane that is?" Her face changed, just slightly. A twitch of the eye. A flicker of guilt? No, not guilt. Annoyance. "I told him to do that because you weren't listening," she said quietly. "You never listened. You just kept trying to fix things with flowers, or coffee, or by being nice. I didn't want nice. I wanted to feel seen. And he saw me." I stood there, dumbfounded. It wasn't just betrayal. It was entitlement. She believed she deserved all of this. And worse, she believed I somehow earned it by not being enough. And then came the final blow. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. "That's why I chose silence. I thought if I faded out slowly, you'd let go peacefully." I looked around the room. The candle on the table. The broken photo frame. The box still waiting above our heads like a tombstone no one wanted to acknowledge. "You thought you could erase me quietly," I said. "But now you've got a man living in the margins of our life and an attic full of confessionals you were too cowardly to speak out loud. And you thought that was peaceful?" She didn't answer. I walked past her toward the door. Picked up my duffel bag, the same one I never really unpacked. But before I could leave, she spoke again. And this time, her voice shook. "He said you'd leave," she whispered. "He said once you knew the truth, you'd vanish. That you'd do what men like you always do. Disappear and let someone else clean up the pieces." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. "Then he doesn't know me," I said. "Because I'm not disappearing." And I meant it. I wasn't going to disappear. I wasn't going to run. Not because I wanted her back. No, those ashes were long cold. But because this wasn't just a breakup anymore. It was a reckoning. And I had one last thing to do before I let go. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I tried. I even turned the motel TV on just to have some noise in the room. But my head was spinning with her words. I faded out slowly so you'd let go peacefully. What kind of person does that? Who designs a slow, quiet exit like they're just slipping off a pair of shoes? I sat in that motel chair with Milo curled against my leg, staring at nothing. The anger didn't come in waves. It was a static hum, background radiation that poisoned everything. I kept replaying that moment in my head, the way she looked past me even during our final confrontation, like I was an interruption, not a man, just some obstacle to step around. But the one thing that wouldn't leave my mind wasn't her. It was the box, the letters, the name at the bottom of each one, Harvey Winslow. And something didn't add up. Therapists don't write long, handwritten updates to spouses, especially when the client never tells you she's in therapy to begin with. And thank you cards? That felt off. Too personal. Too curated. By sunrise, I wasn't just angry. I was suspicious. Deeply. I took out my laptop, logged into our shared home insurance account, and pulled up the most boring documents I could find. Past maintenance claims, utility blueprints, anything to keep my hands busy while my brain tried to solve what felt like a riddle wrapped in fog. That's when I saw it. A request for structural inspection. 6 months ago. Filed under her name. Something about crawl space clearance and moisture assessment. But we didn't have a crawl space. At least, I didn't think we did. And then it hit me. The basement. When we bought the house, the inspector told us there was a sealed section under the basement stairs that had been boarded up decades ago. He said it was probably just an old utility closet and not worth the cost of opening. I forgot about it, but she apparently hadn't. I was back at the house by 9 a.m. Marla was gone. No car in the driveway. Probably at her yoga and journaling class. Or at Harvey's place. Whatever. I didn't care. I wasn't there for her. I went straight to the basement, flipped on the overhead light, and stared at the far wall. The boards were still there. Barely. Some of the nails had been pulled halfway out. The edges looked disturbed. Not fresh, but not untouched either. I got a crowbar from the garage and pulled away the boards one by one. Dust puffed into the air. The wood groaned like it was being disturbed after years of sleep. Behind the paneling was a narrow space. Not even a full room. More like a dead-end hallway. But at the end of it sat a metal file cabinet. One of those ugly beige ones with the squeaky drawers that belonged in 1980s offices. It didn't make sense. Why would she hide this? Why not just throw it out? I slid it forward, the metal legs screeching against the concrete. It was unlocked. Inside were folders. Dozens. Not labeled with letters or dates, but names. And one of them was mine. I pulled it out. Inside were photocopies of my old employment contracts, health records, our mortgage agreement, but all of them were marked. Highlighted. Annotated. Some even had post-it notes that weren't in my handwriting. One read, "Discuss strategy after tax season. Delay separation until April." Another said, "Remind him about life insurance clause. Act casual." That one made me sit down on the cold floor. But it got worse. There was another folder. No name on the tab, just a smiley face drawn in blue ink. Inside were printed screenshots. Messages. Emails. Some from me. Some pretending to be me. At first, I thought they were old exchanges between us, but the dates didn't match up. One was from 2 months ago, and it was addressed to Harvey's office. From my name. Sent from an email I don't use. It was fake. She, or he, had been forging conversations, creating a paper trail, a digital illusion of me being complicit in something. Something I hadn't agreed to. Something I didn't even know about. That's when I realized what this was. She wasn't fading me out. She was erasing me deliberately. Financially. Legally. Digitally. Slowly building a case where I was negligent, inattentive, unstable. One that would make it look like she had no choice but to walk away. One where she could walk cleanly into her new life with everything. And that's when I heard it. Footsteps upstairs. Heavy. Not hers. Then the basement door creaked shut. Then locked. I was trapped. And someone else was now inside my house. The moment that lock clicked into place upstairs, something shifted in my chest. It wasn't just fear, it was certainty. Certainty that I'd never actually known the woman I married. Not really. And now, somewhere above my head, someone she trusted, someone she allowed into our home, was deliberately closing me off from the rest of the world. I didn't yell. That felt pointless. I just moved quickly, quietly, like prey who knew the predator was close but hadn't shown its teeth yet. I turned off the single bulb hanging from the ceiling and backed away from the exposed space where I had just uncovered the file cabinet. In the dark, I listened. Steps moved across the floor above, slow, deliberate. Then silence. I heard the metallic whine of a drawer sliding open somewhere in the kitchen, like someone looking for something specific. Not stealing. Searching. The stairs creaked. Someone was coming down. I slipped deeper into the old crawl space and flattened myself behind a support beam. From where I stood, I could see the bottom of the stairs and the edge of the concrete floor illuminated in a wedge of dim light. Then boots. Heavy, laced-up boots. Work boots. The kind that scuffed tile and tracked dirt into carpets. He reached the basement floor, but he didn't call out. He didn't ask if anyone was home. He didn't even seem surprised that the lights were off. That's when I realized this wasn't the first time he'd been here. He knew where everything was. He moved like a man in familiar territory, heading straight for the file cabinet. I heard him curse under his breath, low and sharp, and then he started pulling drawers out one by one. Papers shuffled. Folders hit the floor. Then silence again. I held my breath. What was he looking for that I had already found? Eventually, he exhaled loudly and kicked the cabinet shut with a metallic thud. And then, he just stood there. I could hear his breathing calm, not rushed. And then he said something. Not to me. Not to anyone in particular. She said he wouldn't come back. His voice was deep. No accent. No emotion. Just words hanging in the stale air of the basement. I didn't respond. He turned. I heard his steps crossing the concrete again, slower this time. He was heading toward the wall. Toward the exposed boards. Toward me. I backed further into the crawl space, my fingers brushing something cold and metal. A wrench. One of mine. I grabbed it without thinking. Then, the light overhead snapped on again. He'd found the pull switch. And now I was lit up like a display in a museum. His eyes met mine instantly. No surprise. No hesitation. Just recognition. You shouldn't have looked, he said, not moving. I didn't answer. The wrench felt absurdly small in my hand. He took one step forward. Then stopped. You think this is about her? He asked. It's not. She's not that clever. That stopped me cold. What? I breathed. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You think Marla planned all this? No. She's a puppet. Smart enough to follow orders, not smart enough to write the script. I stepped back, the wrench slipping in my grip. He tilted his head slightly, amused. You're not the first, Edgar. My name. He knew my name. And suddenly, a detail clicked into place, the cabinet. The folders. The names on the tabs. They weren't just random. They were men. One of them had been me. And maybe the others had been husbands too. I gripped the wrench tighter. What did you do to them? He shrugged. They let go. Eventually. You staged all of this? I asked, voice rising despite the fear clawing at my spine. The letters? The texts? The fake trail? He gave a soft laugh. Not staged. Designed. Paperwork is the new weapon. You don't destroy a man by punching him in the face. You destroy him by making him look unreliable on paper. You drain his voice. You erase him legally, then emotionally. Then, the rest is easy. I stared at him, the truth sinking like a stone in my gut. This wasn't a love affair. It wasn't even betrayal. It was a system, and I had just stepped into it without even realizing. Before he could step closer, I bolted. Not up the stairs, he was between me and the only door. I sprinted toward the back wall where an old basement window sat crusted with dirt and half covered in cobwebs. I rammed the wrench into it with all my strength. The glass shattered in a spray of dust and broken light. I climbed up and out, scraping my side open on the jagged edge, Milo barking wildly somewhere in the distance as my feet hit the grass outside. I didn't stop running until I reached the car. Didn't stop shaking until I locked the doors. Didn't stop breathing like I was drowning until I was halfway down the block. And then, only then, did it finally hit me. This wasn't about getting out of the marriage anymore. This was about surviving it. 2 days after I escaped that house, I sat in a lawyer's office with bandages on my hand and Milo asleep at my feet. I hadn't eaten a proper meal. I hadn't slept more than an hour. But I was awake in a way I hadn't been for years. Her name was Iris Renner, the attorney. Gray hair, sharp eyes, voice like steel. She listened to everything I said without interrupting, just nodding occasionally, scribbling notes on a yellow legal pad. When I told her about the cabinet, the fake emails, the hidden crawl space, the man who knew my name before I spoke, she didn't look shocked. She looked angry. You're not the first one to describe something like this, she said softly, folding her hands. But you may be the first one who made it out with proof. Within hours, she had the wheels turning. She filed an emergency motion to freeze our joint accounts. She flagged my identity with the credit bureaus. She contacted a forensic analyst to examine the forged emails and digitally trace the edits. Every step forward felt like lifting a brick off my chest. But the real breakthrough came on day 3. A name. A second man. Someone else who had been married to a client of Harvey Winslow. His wife left him, drained his accounts, painted him as unstable. And he had tried to take his life. He survived. But barely. And he, too, had been ignored. Together, we brought it to the state board. And within a week, Harvey Winslow's license was suspended pending a full investigation. Marla didn't return to the house. Not once. She didn't contact me. Not to apologize. Not to beg. Not even to accuse. She vanished, the way people do when the mask finally slips and the plan crumbles beneath their feet. I never found out what she told her friends. I don't even know if she truly understood the depth of what she'd done. Maybe she was just a pawn. Maybe not. But I do know this. When someone builds a life on silence, eventually the noise of truth catches up. I stayed in a rental cabin outside of town for a few months. Nothing fancy. Just me, Milo, and the sound of real, honest quiet. Not the kind she left me with, but the kind I chose. I started writing again. Not books or blogs. Just thoughts. I went to therapy, for real this time, with someone whose office didn't smell like manipulation and lavender oil. I let myself grieve. And one day, I got up early, drove to a lake I hadn't seen since I was a teenager, and let go of the ring. Just dropped it into the water without ceremony. No tears. No speech. Just a small splash and peace. Now, months later, I'm not fixed. I don't think people break and fix like machines. But I'm clear. I laugh again. I cook for myself without hoping someone notices. I walk Milo every morning, and he still looks back like he's checking I'm real. I am. I've started teaching again. Biology, my old love. It's strange, standing in front of a whiteboard and watching young minds light up when you explain why trees heal themselves after being cut. There's something deeply poetic in that. And last week, as I left the campus, I bumped into someone, literally. She dropped her coffee, I dropped my folder, we both apologized too fast. Her name's Fallon. Not flashy. Not complicated. She has a little scar above her eyebrow and laughs like she means it. We've had coffee twice since. No expectations. No masks. Just two people talking like people. And for the first time in what feels like forever, I don't feel erased. I feel seen. I feel like me again. And maybe, just maybe, that's more than enough.